Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This video is going to explain the factors influencing the generation of tension in the skeletal muscles. In the early part of this video, I will explain a couple of new concepts which are important towards understanding the factors regulating the muscle tension. Let's begin. In order to contract, every skeletal muscle fiber gets nerve supply from the axon terminal of a motor neuron. The group of muscle fibers in a muscle innervated by a single motor neuron comprise a motor unit. The number of muscle fibers or the size of a motor unit is variable depending on the nature of the muscle. Depending upon the functions, a particular type of muscle may have small motor units or large motor units. A small motor unit is an arrangement where a single motor neuron supplies a small number of muscle fibers. Small motor units permit very fine control on the muscles. The best example in the humans is the small motor units of the extraocular eye muscles that move the eyeballs. Small motor units are also involved in the many fine movements of the fingers and thumb of the hand for grasping and texting. A large motor unit is an arrangement where a single motor neuron supplies a large number of muscle fibers in a muscle. Large motor neurons are concerned with simple or gross movements such as powerfully extending the knee joint. The best example is the large motor unit of the thigh muscles or back muscles, where a single motor neuron will supply thousands of muscle fibers in a muscle. A single action potential from a motor neuron will produce a single contraction in the muscle fibers of its motor units. This isolated contraction is called a muscle twitch. A muscle twitch can last for a few milliseconds or 100 milliseconds depending on the muscle type. The tension produced by a single twitch can be measured by a myogram, an instrument that measures the amount of tension produced over time. Each twitch undergoes three phases. The first phase is the latent phase, during which the action potential is being propagated along the sarcolemma and calcium ions are released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. This is the phase during which excitation and contraction are being coupled, but contraction has yet to occur. The contraction phase occurs next. The calcium ions in the sarcoplasm have bound to troponin. Tropomyosin has shifted away from actin binding sites, cross bridges have formed, and sarcomeres are actively shortening to the point of peak tension. The last phase is the relaxation phase. When tension decreases as contraction stops. Calcium ions are pumped out of the sarcoplasm into the and cross bridge cycling stops, returning the muscle fibers to their resting state. To move an object referred to as load, the sarcomeres in the muscle fibers of the skeletal muscle must shorten. The force generated by the contraction of the muscle is called muscle tension. The factors which influence amount of tension produced by the muscles are listed on this slide. These include length tension range of sarcomere, frequency of motor neuron stimulation, recruitment of motor units, type of contractions, and muscle tone. We shall look into details of each factor in the next remaining part of this video. Do stay with me. During sarcomere shortening, myosin heads attach to actin to form cross bridges followed by the thin filaments sliding over the thick filaments, and this results in creating the tension of the muscle contraction. The cross bridges can only form where thin and thick filaments already overlap, so that the length of the sarcomere has a direct influence on the force generated when the sarcomere shortens. This is called the length tension relationship. This line graph depicts the relationship between tension and length in the sarcomere. Sarcomeres produce maximum tension when thick and thin filaments overlap between about 80 to 120% of the resting length of the sarcomere. Simply put, the tension generated in the skeletal muscle is a function of magnitude of overlap between actin and myosin filaments. If a sarcomere is stretched too far, there will be insufficient overlap of the myofilaments and the less force will be produced. If the muscle is overcontracted, the potential for further contraction is reduced, which in turn reduces the amount of force produced. The rate at which a motor neuron fires action potentials affects the tension produced in the skeletal muscle. If the fibers are stimulated while a previous twitch is still occurring, the second twitch will be stronger. This response is called wave summation because the excitation contraction coupling effects of successive motor neuron signaling is summed or added together. At the molecular level, summation occurs because the second stimulus triggers the release of more calcium ions, which become available to activate additional sarcomeres while the muscle is still contracting from the first stimulus. Summation results in greater contraction of the motor unit. If the frequency of motor neuron signaling increases, summation and subsequent muscle tension in the motor unit continues to rise until it reaches a peak point. The tension at this peak point is about 3 to 4 times greater than the tension of a single twitch, a state referred to as incomplete tetanus. During incomplete tetanus, the muscle goes through quick cycles of contraction with a short relaxation phase for each. If the stimulus frequency is too high, that the relaxation phase disappears completely, contractions become continuous in a process called complete tetanus. During tetanus, the concentration of calcium ions in the sarcoplasm allows virtually all of the sarcomeres to form cross bridges and shorten, so that a contraction can continue uninterrupted. Even eventually, the muscle fatigues and can no longer produce tension. When a skeletal muscle has been dormant for an extended period and then activated to contract, with all other things being equal, the initial contractions generate about one half the force of later contractions. The muscle tension increases in a graded manner that to some looks like a set of stairs. This tension increase is called trapé, a condition where muscle contractions become more efficient. It is also known as the staircase effect. It is believed that trapé results from a higher concentration of calcium in the sarcoplasm, resulting from a steady stream of signals from the motor neuron. It can only be maintained with adequate amount of ATP molecules. There is a wide range of motor units within many skeletal muscles. The small motor units are more excitable, firing first to their skeletal muscle fibers, which also tend to be the smallest. Activation of smaller motor units results in a relatively small degree of tension generated in the muscle. As more strength is needed, larger motor units with bigger, higher threshold motor neurons are enlisted to activate large muscle fibers. This increasing activation of motor units produces an increase in muscle contraction known as the recruitment. As more motor units are recruited, the muscle contraction grows progressively stronger. Recruitment allows a feather to be picked up using the biceps brachii arm muscle with minimal force and a heavy weight to be lifted by the same muscle by recruiting the largest motor units. To prevent complete muscle fatigue, motor units are generally not at all simultaneously active, but instead, some motor units rest while others are active, which allows for longer muscle contractions. The nervous system uses recruitment as a mechanism to efficiently utilize a skeletal muscle. There are two type there are two main types of skeletal muscle contractions, namely isotonic contractions and isometric contractions. Most actions of the body are a result of a combination of isotonic and isometric contractions working together to produce a wide range of outcomes. In isotonic contractions, the tension in the muscle stays constant. A load is moved as the length of the muscle changes. An isometric contraction occurs as the muscle produces tension without changing the length of the muscle. Next, we shall look at the details of each of these types of contraction. As described earlier, keeping tension constant, length of the muscle changes in isotonic contractions. There are two main types of isotonic contractions, concentric and eccentric. A concentric contraction involves the muscle shortening to move a load. An example of this is the bicep brachii muscle contracting when a hand weight is brought upward with increasing muscle tension. As the biceps brachii contract, the angle of the elbow joint decreases as the forearm is brought towards the body. Here, the biceps brachii contracts as sarcomeres in its muscle fibers are shortening and cross bridges form. The myosin heads pull the actin. An eccentric contraction occurs as the muscle tension diminishes and the muscle lengthens. In this case, the hand weight is lowered in a slow and controlled manner as the amount of cross bridges being activated by the nervous system stimulation decreases. In this case, as tension is released from the biceps brachii, the angle of the elbow joint increases. Eccentric contractions are also used for movement and the balance of the body. As described earlier, keeping the length constant, tension in the muscles is generated in isometric contractions. Isometric contractions involve sarcomere shortening and increasing muscle tension, but do not move a load as the force produced cannot overcome the resistance provided by the load. For example, if one attempts to lift a hand weight that is too heavy, there will be sarcomere activation and shortening to a point and ever increasing muscle tension but no change in the angle of the elbow joint. In everyday living, isometric contractions are active in maintaining posture and maintaining bone and joint stability. However, holding your holding your head in an upright position occurs not because the muscles cannot move the head, but because the goal is to maintain stationary head position and not produce movement. In physiology, muscle tone is the continuous and passive partial contraction of the muscles during the resting state. Clinically, it is the muscle's resistance to passive stretch during resting state. Even If a muscle is not producing movement, it is contracted a small amount to continually stabilize joint and maintain posture. Muscle tone is accomplished by a complex interaction between the nervous system and skeletal muscles that result in activation of a few motor units at a time, most likely in a cyclical manner. In this manner, muscles never fatigue completely as some motor units can recover while others are active. The absence of the low level contractions that lead to muscle tone is referred to as hypotonia and can result from damage to parts of the central nervous system such as cerebellum or from loss of innervation to a skeletal muscle as in poliomyelitis. Hypotonic muscles have a flaccid appearance and display functional impairments such as weak reflexes. Conversely, excessive muscle tone is referred to as hypertonia, accompanied by excessive reflex responses, often the result of damage to the upper motor neurons in the central nervous system. Hypertonia can present with muscle rigidity or spasticity, a phasic change in muscle tone, where a limb will snap back from passive stretching. Thanks for watching and listening. Do share this video with your friends and colleagues. If you like this video, subscribe to this channel for watching more videos.